Welcome to this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio, the weekly radio news magazine that we put together at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy. Find us online at tertiumquids.org, and we have archives of previous programs there ready for you to download, and we've got a great one for you, and it's all about power, politics, and intrigue. And, you know, we could almost do it Shakespearean style, but I'd rather not try to speak in some sort of verse. We'll just jump right in with our first guest. You may recall from about a year ago, a little bit more than a year ago, he unearthed the fact that UVA, despite their rhetoric, was actually putting the thumb on the scales of those who would apply for admission to Mr. Jefferson's University with, what was it called, Jeff? A heads-up list? Jeff Thomas is on with us. Good to catch up with you, Jeff. How are you doing, sir?
Thanks so much, Joe, for having me. Yeah, it was called the Dean's Watch List, and there's a lawsuit going on against Harvard right now that is alleging that sort of same thing constitutes discrimination, specifically against Asian American people. So if anybody is out there who has had a son or daughter who has been rejected to UVA in recent years, you may have a lawsuit. Basically what was happening is they were selling admission seats to the children of the wealthy and privileged, and I think that we could all agree that the government should not be putting its hand on the scales of the people who already have all the power and privilege in our society in the first place.
Certainly.
That's basically.
I'm sorry.
Joe, go ahead.
No, finish your thought. I apologies.
No, that was just a short summary.
No. So certainly in Charlottesville, nobody in Charlottesville likes to be melodramatic about anything. He says, tongue firmly planted in cheek. But is it unfair for me to point out that the whole reason Jefferson wanted to found the University of Virginia and the academical village in the 18th century was because he felt like university education, if the free society was going to continue, was going to be imperative that everyone have access to it, not just the rich families like he experienced at William and Mary.
Joe, you're exactly right. And if people can't have a way to work their way out of poverty or out of the middle class, these hardworking, innocent kids who are smart and who have all the talent in the world, then how are we going to have a more equal and fair society?
Right.
I think that we can all agree that Jefferson's principles are not being lived out, unfortunately.
I mean, it's a little bit more honest in India, where the caste system is pretty much just written out for everybody. Sorry, if you're born to this family, you're screwed. Too bad on you. Better luck next life. And here it's like this hand in glove backroom stuff where it's like, hey, this guy's, Dad gave tons of money to the school, so let's put him on the top of the list. What has the UVA been doing in the year since, I guess it was April of last year, in filing of this suit? Have they ever released the unredacted documents regarding this policy?
No, they've not. I recently received some more documents from them, about 500 pages worth, that show that they engaged in a cover-up. Actually, everybody at the Board of Visitors knew about the article and this Dean's Watch List, everybody at the president's office, and they had a press response that lied to the people. They said that this is not happening. We need to make sure it sort of stays quiet, come to us with any questions, and they did a PR spin type thing. So that's going to be coming out eventually. And one thing that I think is bright on the horizon is that there is a new UVA president who is coming in, James Ryan, who is the first of his family ever to go to college. And he's a brilliant guy, and I don't think that he would stand for this sort of behavior. So when you get a new administration coming in, there's always a possibility for change. So I'm optimistic that when he comes in, he can just put an end to this really shameful practice.
Well, and your part, I think we undersell how important that part of somebody. Oh, well, he went to Tony. He was working at was it Harvard? Was where he was working as the dean of the School of Education, and was definitely in the Ivy League working. But people forget that he might remember being that kid of a blue collar family who gets through his own efforts, the opportunity to go to university. That stuff carries with you for a long time. And we can't undersell the importance of that.
That's why the diversity of social background is so important in these colleges, because there are a lot of folks who are either wealthy or poor, and they grow up and they only hang out with people who are just like them. And then when people like James Ryan, the incoming UVA president, who went to Yale on full scholarship, then went to UVA Law on full scholarship, when they meet people who are different from them, it gives them empathy, and they can understand that we're not all alike, and there are people who struggle in different ways. And that sort of thing is exactly what we need in the business world, in government, and in any other realm of life in order to make a more fair society.
Is it dangerous, Jeff, in this day and age where, people are making the most amazing leaps of faith to try to say that there's this racist division going on, even through the poor performing inner city public schools are this own subset secret hand in glove whisper campaign to keep the black community down anyway. And with all this going on, your revelations at UVA, I'm surprised this hasn't made bigger news over the last year, because we've watched people make the most amazing cases for racial, tensions and this soft-core bigotry. Why hasn't this been a bigger story?
I think that the people at the top are in on it. Quite honestly, I think that you'll see, if these names were unredacted, as we've seen in the past and at other public universities, that a lot of these people, a lot of these kids who are benefiting are sons and daughters of legislators. And all these folks, the Attorney General, the former Speaker of the House, a lot of other high officials, they all went to UVA. And all these big donors who are on the Board of Visitors, they all benefit. Why wouldn't they want to use the system to their advantage? Now, I don't think that's right. I don't think it's moral. But there's almost a backup system for people, for the children of privilege and power, who are not bright and who are lazy, and who are given every advantage in the entire world, but who do not work hard. They can still get into UVA because of who Daddy is. And what that is affirmative action for wealthy people.
So when you would think that a university would want to sanctify this, you would think that just in this world that we're in now, where there's so much information going out there, so many websites dedicated to this, that no university, especially hard on the heels of the rape on campus case and Rolling Stone magazine, even though it was phony baloney, plastic banana, it damaged their numbers, their applications went down. Afterwards, less people felt like, yeah, that sounds like the kind of place we want to send our daughter, especially that they would be out there trying to show that they're wide open for everybody. But it also shows a certain amount of closed border, walled city idea. We have this academia that we're only going to allow certain people into. And I feel like we're on the beginnings of whether you look at Liberty University and their online classes and other places where the university walls are crumbling as it is just under the marketplace.
It's really interesting, Joe, because they don't tell people about what actually goes on. They hide it. What they do is they tell people the opposite for PR reasons, because they know very well that it's really popular to say that we let in everybody. We're need blind. We're a merit-based school. That's just not the case. And when you find out what's actually happening, it does boost those alternatives or places where you can go and get just as good of an education and where you won't be subject to this sort of class warfare type stuff.
Is that the future? I mean, we talk about homeschooling, we talk about school choice as it applies to elementary school education and high school. Is that really the big future, and that technology is going to allow the truly democratization, almost the way Gutenberg's printing press democratized the Bible, and everyone could have a Bible now, and everyone could have an encyclopedia because we can print them out and mass produce them. This mass production of access to education is truly, if we're going to achieve the things the internet, puts out there, that's where we should be going with this. And part of Teresa Sullivan's story is that her one job that she was given when she was hired was to expand UVA's online classes, and the professors railed against it, and she didn't do it, and she was going to get fired for it, and she ginned up a student protest to create a victim mentality when all she was doing was protecting a bunch of six-figure professors from having to, put their teaching skills online for more people to get a hold of.
Yeah, I think the jury is still out on whether or not online education can truly benefit the masses. Now, we've heard the promises of online education for 20 years, and there are some people, especially in other countries, who can benefit from online learning. But it takes really people who are self-motivated, and we see that people who are at the sort of highest strata of our society, who are the children of the wealthy and privileged, they still benefit from the classroom experience. It still is important to go and have a teacher teaching you and be able to interact with them. I hope that UVA and other schools will truly be able to democratize their offerings, but until they actually can and make it available to middle class and ordinary people, then I'm still am sort of skeptical. What we have emerging is potentially a class-based type system. It's just, in other words, technology is neutral, and it sort of is cauterizing the wounds already existing in society. I hope that changes, but I haven't seen evidence that it has at a large scale yet.
So your latest book is Virginia Politics, Government in a New Century, and the Virginia way, Jeff, is almost an offhand comment regarding how things work. But we just see Greg Habib quitting the Republican Party in Virginia. Republican Party hemorrhages a huge number of seats in the General Assembly. Terry McAuliffe's stamp on Virginia politics, the way they made Ed Gillespie look like a redneck zealot when he was anything but. Talk about Virginia politics and power and your book that's just out.
It's really interesting if you listen to radio shows like yours and read the papers, because what you find is exactly what you're mentioning. There is a bipartisan consensus in Virginia around what I call the money party. In other words, people like people like Dick Saslaw and Tommy Norment, these guys who have been in the legislature and who are head of the Senate. They've been in there for 20 or 30 years, 40 years, in fact, in Dick Saslaw's case. They do whatever their donors want, period. So elections don't really matter that much, except in social issues. And that's when you get this, you get race baiting, you get gun baiting, you get abortion baiting. When it does actually matter, of course, there are major differences between Republicans and Democrats in the issues of abortion, guns, other things, women's rights. But it doesn't really matter in the end, because they're still going to do whatever the heck Dominion wants. They're still going to do whatever Altura wants, and they're still going to make sure that those kids who are working hard, who are out in the rural countryside or who are out in the city, in the public housing projects of Richmond, don't have a chance to get a decent life unless they're really, really lucky, because they can't get into places like UVA and William and Mary. So there was something really, really fascinating that happened. Two things that happened earlier this month on the same day. First, the former Speaker of the House, Bill Howell, announced that he was going to go work for McGuire Woods Consulting as a lobbyist.
Right.
Okay. Now, he didn't say he was working as a lobbyist. He said that he was working as a consultant, because it's illegal to work as a lobbyist if after you've been in the legislature, you have to have a 1-year waiting period.
Right.
The
but
second thing that happened
you can
was
consult the lobbyists.
I'm sorry, please go ahead.
You can consult the lobbyists, though.
That's right. That's right. You can call up your colleagues and schedule meetings for them and tell McGuire Woods how to manipulate your former colleagues.
Exactly.
The second thing that happened on that same day is that Senator Tommy Norment, who is the Virginia Senate Majority Leader, married a lobbyist. A lobbyist for she's a lobbyist for the city of Virginia Beach and a number of healthcare interests. This had originally been exposed that he was having an affair with this woman 3 years ago, because one of his clients tried to blackmail him, and the FBI opened up an investigation because this senator, was sponsoring all of her bills, was voting on her bills, would never abstain on anything, and they were sleeping together, Joe.
Right.
And then so he divorced his wife, and he got married to this lobbyist. And then because of their guilty conscience, because they know that the Virginia way is very wrong, former Speaker Howell and Senator Norment announced on the very same day that they were doing these corrupt, underhanded things. That is the true Virginia way. And all this other stuff about how they're, walking in the footsteps of Thomas Jefferson, that's all just a bunch of bull that they tell people so they'll leave them alone and they can do what they really want, which is to advance the interest of their donors.
Sadly, we're approaching the 400th anniversary of the Virginia General Assembly. I mean, 400 years this body has been meeting. I guess, they figured out, best practices by now, how to make this possible. We ran the the postscript of an ad, the very end of an ad, thanking Emmett Hanger for his leadership in Medicaid expansion, paid for by the Hospital Owners Guild or whatever it was. I said, so it's not a mystery why all of a sudden a bunch of Republicans that had for 6 years said that Medicaid expansion was wrong were all of a sudden voting for Medicaid expansion. And everyone wants to say that Greg Habib quitting the Republican Party is over Trump. It's over being muscled into supporting something that he had opposed for 6 years.
It's really interesting. You would think that Tea Party folks and populist sort of Sanders-type Democrats, you would think that they would rebel against this. But they don't. They get in office and they have all these ideals, and some of them I do believe are sincere in their beliefs. But then they find out that you're one of 100. You can't get anything done unless you sort of play this game.
Mm-hmm.
And then they go and they find, and after a period of decades, they get co-opted, and then they just become part of the corrupt system, and they do whatever Dominion or the Hospital Association or whoever wants. That's the Virginia way.
And we're told that, the Virginia retirement system is only a little bit better than it was before, and nobody's made off with that money. But if you were a corporation, you'd be Gordon Gekko raiding the retirement fund of some corporation. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, people are starting to catch on. I mean, look at we have a Democratic Socialist member of the party. The Democrats are losing a grip on the far left of their party because eventually we had an activist in Charlottesville that bemoaned the Democratic Party caucus in Charlottesville this a couple of months ago had 740 voting members and only 13 were black. And he's like, I don't know where the black community is. Well, they know you've been lying to them for 50 years, and they finally caught on that eventually, the lies come back to roost. I just feel like the lies not, being caught by the conservative-minded, those who would talk about a free market and an open society where everyone's got an opportunity based on your effort. We haven't made a good enough case of it to the black community. We've listened to our consultants that have said, don't go talk to them. You're never going to win with them. Talk to rural America, who are going to vote for conservatives anyway, whatever they stood for. So we've lost this opportunity to the Democratic Socialists who want us to become Venezuela, Jeff.
I think that the farther we get, the more sort of unequal we get, and the more this power imbalance becomes obvious, the more that things like the Bob McDonnell corruption scandal or the incidents I just mentioned become in sort of part of the public consciousness. The more I think that far left and far right people have in common. And the more I think that appeals to people who see that the system is completely broken. So they want to check out. They don't want to do anything. They want to blow it all up. And, there is a chance. There is a chance, I believe, that the Tea Party folks who get in office who are new, I think that they can make a difference. And there is a chance that the people who get in office who are new, who are Democrats, who are these anti-corruption people who aren't taking money from Dominion or these other corrupt interests, I think that they can make a difference. I think that there is common ground, and I believe that we should all work together. But we'll have to see, because that has not yet happened in the 400 years that the Virginia General Assembly has been in action.
Do you see, though, to me, there are stories like the one about former Virginia Senator Tom Garrett and the way his Republican-connected staff turned on him in the press. I feel like that there's some disingenuity when, a staff is assigned to you by the party and then they go out and say, oh, yeah, he's all these bad things. To me, this smells of the whatever you want to call it, the swamp, the deep state, but just the Republican and or Democratic Party establishment turning on somebody who stuck his head too high out of the gopher hole and saying, well, we have to teach that lesson. Same thing with Trump, and the same thing, you mentioned the McDonald's scandal, but nobody ever wanted to bat an eye over Terry McAuliffe taking millions of dollars from Mississippi and never building a single electric car with green tech. I mean, there seems to be double standards in it, but there's all sorts of rent seeking going on, and then punishing the people who say something about it.
I completely agree with you, and that begs the question: how do we move forward?
Yeah. Is it cases like this with UVA where we break the wall down? Because I worry that with this zeal for democratic socialism, if we break open this story about UVA, we're going to find a worse result right now, because our zeal is for more government, which just leads to more of this kind of corruption.
Yeah, I get your point. I don't have the answer to that. My answer is that I think we need to get more people involved.
Yeah.
Period. I think that we need more democracy, not less. And if the people want to vote to do something that's not a good idea, well, then that still is the voice of the people. That's what we need to do. So there are so many problems in Virginia society. My best solution, I think, would be to have it so we could amend as a people, so we could amend the Constitution of Virginia. Now, there are, I believe, 29 other states that have popular referendums. And that means that sometimes they pass laws that are far left. That means that sometimes the people pass laws that are far right. But if that's what the people want, then that's a good thing, because what we have is something that's totally anti-democratic and just means that big money people get what they want.
I've always said that if we had 100% voter turnout, the ability of these people to pull the wool over our eyes would be limited, because, what's the expression about fooling all of the people some of the time and some of the people all of the time, but you can't fool them all of the time. And the more involved we are, the less likely we are to have the wool pulled over our eyes. Jeff Thomas, thank you so much. People can get the book, the Virginia Politics, online, and I've got the link right here. We're going to send it out there. It's goodreads.com, Virginia Politics, Government in a New Century. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again very soon.
Really appreciate your time, Joe. Thank you.
Coming up next, Matt Waters, Libertarian for Senate. Haven't heard his name? Well, we'll get into that coming up next on this week's edition of Freedom and Prosperity Radio. His website, and he wasn't invited to the debate at the Homestead on Saturday, but he sort of made an appearance as Judy Woodruff asked and brought up the fact that both Tim Kaine and Corey Stewart grew up about 100 miles from each other in Minnesota. Matt Waters, if you go to mattwaters.com, it says Matt Waters, the Virginian for U.S. Senate in 2018, and he is on the phone with us. He is also the Libertarian nominee for Senate. Matt, good morning. Good to have you back on the program. How are you doing, sir?
I'm well, Joe. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. I want to begin with, because your Twitter handle also says you're pro-life, and it is one of those things that I think is difficult for the average person on the street to grasp how libertarian and pro-life go together, because they automatically assume, like some sort of commentary from Whoopi Goldberg at The View that, you want a political party just small enough to fit in somebody's bedroom. But explain how a libertarian, defends pro-life and defends the unborn child, beginning, because that was a big part of the debate on Saturday, was who's going to take apart Roe and which judicial nominee and so on and so forth.
Right, Joe. Well, I mean, look, again, thanks for having me. And you correctly pointed out my website, mattwaters.com. I have a whole section of priorities. One of the few, I think probably the only candidate has a section as involved or in depth as my priorities are and policies are of any of the candidates in the race right now. And I have a whole section on life and creating a culture of life. And it goes even beyond the womb to, gun violence in the inner cities. What do we do there, and other things like that, the opioid crisis. And but getting to your question, look, I mean, the government set out to do, really one thing, to protect our rights. The Declaration of Independence sets out that, Thomas Jefferson wrote, a good Virginian down from your neck of the woods, that protect our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness or property. That's all the government's supposed to do. This is the real, I think, where the two candidates missed on Saturday. But protecting life is the first thing. And we may disagree about that. A lot of people disagree about when life begins, that sort of thing. But I am certainly in the pro-life camp and believe life begins at conception. And the libertarian mantra, too, is, one of our taglines is, do no harm. Don't tread on anybody.
Right.
Don't beat people up and take their stuff, and that starts with life. And that's why we're huge Second Amendment advocates, because we believe that the individual has a right to protect him or herself.
It's one of those things that I've found so interesting is that when we rely, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, we seem to rely on who we elect to do things for us. We vote for somebody to defend life rather than spending the time and effort to teach our children the preciousness of life and the preciousness of the activities that culminate in the creation of a new life. And those are the things I think we lose when we count on just ordinance to do this for us. Is that a fair thing to say, Matt?
Yeah, I think it is, and I'll point folks back to my website because I'm a huge advocate of the nonprofit sector. I've worked in this sector for 25 years, and take the issue of life, or really any other issue, medicine or healthcare, this sort of thing. There are nonprofits out there doing some really innovative things without the help of government and going around the government. So, pregnancy centers, maternity homes, adoption agencies, all working on this issue without coercion from the state, without tax dollars from the state, which is why I would say, Planned Parenthood should be defunded. I do agree with that. In fact, Thomas Jefferson again said to compel a man to furnish funds for that which he finds abhorrent is wrong. And so I think using tax dollars to fund a particular view on that issue and many others is absolutely wrong, and that needs to come off of the table. But on that issue, again, you've got adoption agencies, maternity homes, pregnancy centers, all working on that issue without regard to what the state says one way or the other.
You bring up something, and I think that this is where we're going in their society, is the far left and the far right, or that which portrays itself as the far right, are pulling at. We see the reparational socialists winning primaries against longtime Democratic stalwarts in New York and even in Virginia, and both parties are being fragmented. Is there a place for the libertarian where we agree that people's liberty should be protected, amongst those who have been disaffected by extremism in their political parties?
Yeah, it is, Joe. And look, Ronald Reagan said this. Ronald Reagan said, behind every good Republican, there stands a libertarian. He said this in 1977 or thereabouts to Reason Magazine. And unfortunately, I don't know that I'm standing behind a Republican. I don't think there is a Republican in this race, which is one of the reasons why I'm running. I mean, the Republican Party used to stand for balanced budgets. They used to stand for stopping the debt ceiling increase. At least they did under Obama, but now under President Trump they don't. We really are the fiscal conservatives, and that's the one thing that was missing from the debate on Saturday, which was, neither of the two candidates talked about what I call the elephant standing in the room, which is our $22 trillion debt. Mm-hmm. While they jabbed each other for about an hour or so, the debt increased over $60 million. It's increasing at about $1 million a minute. And that's the existential crisis that threatens the future of the republic. And that's not my phraseology. That comes from the Joint Chiefs of Staff, various members there who said, greater than the threat we face in Iraq or Afghanistan is this debt. And we've got to get on top of it. And they just don't talk about it. They, together, what I call the Republicrats, together in the so-called debate, both voiced, backing Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid as it stands right now. That's impossible. That's $2 trillion of federal spending every year, and all three programs are going broke in the next 10, 11, 12 years. So it's irresponsible not to look at these things, and again, they kick the can down the road like most politicians do, and that's why we're in this race, is to really restore common sense to the debate, we hope. One place of common ground I would say with the candidates, and they both said they supported a 355-ship Navy, which I do agree with. However, while you do that, Kane said I supported it, and Stewart said, oh, you didn't support it. Well, Kane did support it on a certain bill that wasn't voted on, and then he voted against the defense bill later, and so he can say he did support it, but he didn't support it. And this is Washington politics, right?
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, yeah. Well, would you support a single issue, kind of like what we do in the Virginia General Assembly, where a germaneness clause, if you will, where each bill has to be what it's about and not with a million different riders upon it?
Joe, that's exactly where I was going. These omnibus bills that are so big and so crammed full of so many things, I think do a huge disservice. And this is where politics can be played. If you just had a clean bill, for example, on a 355-ship Navy, use that as an example, then let's have an up or down vote on that, right? I think that's the way to go.
So you talk about several different things, and would you, when you talk about reforming those entitlement programs, the Medicaid, the Social Security, what would Matt Waters, the senator, want to do to fix those, to make sure whatever covenants have been agreed to by our pensioners, and that they're going to can do what they were promised?
Well, I tell you, the first thing is the idea that it's a real promise to the American people. It's not. The Supreme Court, I believe in around 1962, said the American people are not guaranteed Social Security benefits, and they're not owed the benefits per the United States government ruling. So that's myth number one. But to your point, there are multiple ways to get there, and it would take time. I mean, there are countries that have done it. Chile, Australia, and others have done this, where you have a period of transition, right? A period where there are people who are in the program can stay in the program. Younger people can start to opt out at certain percentages, and then you move to you have a public program right now. It becomes a public-private program, and moving to a completely private program.
Well, Matt, before I leave you, it sounds like the storms are messing with us again. Matt, are you still there?
I am.
Okay, good. I want to follow up on a couple of quick things before we run out of time there. You talk about income tax on your website, and I think the last time we were on, we talked about that, ending federal income taxes and replacing it with nothing. Because I think we talked about this in the early onset, whether it's a fair tax, a flat tax. What does the federal government then do to fund things like national defense?
Yeah, up until, look, this has also been done before, right? There was a time from about 1789 to 1913 when there was no personal federal income tax. The Libertarian Party looked at the personal federal income tax and rightly declared that it is theft. It's your property. This is, again, what the government is supposed to protect your property, not beat you up and take your property, i.e. your paycheck in this case. So, I mean, I guess the first, this is a point of attack, right? The first point is a philosophical one, that it doesn't belong to the government. So I would say, first of all, I don't care how the government funds itself, as long as they don't take my money. That's point one. Point two, there are a number of different ways that you can fund the government. And first, you want to drive down costs, and that's the other point of taking that money off of the table, is you're going to force the government, theoretically, to drive down spending costs. And then, how's the government done it before? I mean, Trump is increasing tariffs right now. Tariffs have always been the way, and they are taxes, by the way, that the government has funded itself mostly. These are talking points, and I start on the I guess, however you want to put it on the spectrum, but we're starting at a certain point, making the point that philosophically it doesn't belong to the federal government. Your paycheck belongs to you. And here's what happens. I mean, honestly, on the other side of this, what we're not saying is that if you give Americans back the money they've earned, and most Americans work from January 1st to about April 18th to pay all federal, state, and local taxes. That's more than housing and groceries combined, just to pay the governments their money. If you give that back to the American people, you're giving them about $11,000 to $12,000 annual pay raise every year. You want to see the economy jump at 5% or 6%? Do that.
Hey, Matt, I want to get into a couple other issues. Do you have time, and do you and I trust this phone line to stay connected?
Well, yeah, let's see what happens. Let's keep going.
Because I want to talk about immigration reform and balanced budget and peace. And the first, the construct that the Congress has consent decree over military actions. We'll get into all that with Matt Waters, the Libertarian who was left out of the Senate debate. Hey, we're visiting with Matt Waters, a Libertarian candidate for Senate. I'm getting a lot of great emails from folks who are like, thank you for talking to Matt. I never would not talk to Matt. He was terrific the last time he was on the program, and I do appreciate you staying with us on the phone. Matt, on an existential question, I want to get back to topics of your stance on different issues.
Sure.
In the late 18th century, early 19th century, this guy Jefferson started a whole new political party, and everyone says, "Oh, we talk about redistricting, and people talk about Republicans and Democrats like that's a birthright, like it's male female. We can self-identify as different things, but except for Republican and Democrat, apparently. But does the libertarian movement need somebody like a Jefferson? Because you are growing from the grassroots up. A campaign to win as a libertarian for Senate. Do you need a Rand Paul or somebody notable like that to break from their parties, or even a Joe Manchin or somebody say, that's it, I've had enough. I'm a conservative-leaning Democrat, or I'm a free market Republican, or an anti-war Republican, whatever it may be, to really put the name recognition behind growing the Libertarian Party?
Yeah, that's a good question. I've certainly called on Rand Paul on a number of occasions to just declare it, just make it official, and join the Libertarian Party. There's a Freedom Caucus even in the House. You've got some members there that are doing good work, and Thomas Massey, of course, Justin Amash out of Michigan. There are some men and women up on Capitol Hill that are doing libertarian work and they come out of our mold, but run in the Republican Party. So maybe I would say the jury's kind of out on that. I mean, I think that's certainly a possibility. And I'll tell you, as the Republicans continue to go down the road of not balancing the budget, of tax increases, i.e. through tariffs and other things, you may see someone like Rand Paul jump. Wouldn't necessarily surprise me.
So let's get into some of the topics. Obviously, immigration reform came up a lot during the Senate debate on Saturday. Talk about what a libertarian believes the borders of a country built on the idea of, to defend these rights, governments are instituted amongst men. So you quoted Jefferson, so can I. That part of the Declaration of Independence that says, yes, we believe all men are created equal, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, but in order to ensure these rights, the government has to have some say, and certainly developed by the consent of those governed. Talk about a libertarian's border.
Yeah, so, like any political party, we're going to have some debate on this. We're going to have people who are open border libertarians, and I'm not in that camp. I do think there's a place for tighter border security. I do believe that we need to, have stricter enforcement. This is what we're addressing. First of all, this is a very complex problem.
Sure.
The reason it's complex is because you have, I think, no fewer than 5 different government agencies involved in it, which makes it very complex. They don't talk to each other. They don't work with one another, which is part of the reforms that different members of Congress have talked about. So there's a streamlining and a simplification of the process. The process is also very old. I mean, a lot of the rules built on immigration were built in the 1920s. Not unlike Social Security. We're still, we have a Social Security program built in 1935, but it's 2018. We need to change with the times, and government is usually the last place to change. So I would say a couple things. I mean, personally, I'm not for open borders, but I'm also not for eliminating ICE or the Immigration Customs Enforcement. I think that's a mistake. And then I would say I'm also not for a wall. When you realize that, President Trump's asked for, $70 billion, up to $70 billion to build a wall, when 70% of illegal immigrants are coming over to the United States via JetBlue, the wall doesn't make much sense.
Well, and you mentioned one of the things that's bothered me since the beginnings of the Department of Homeland Security, and I was actually good friends with the governor of Pennsylvania, Tom Ridge, when he took it over, and I said, Tom, what are you doing? This is a fool's errand. And they have, in very little ways, addressed any of the things that were their construct. Of airport security is a little bit better, but once you're in Logan Airport, you're not going to go through security again, which is what Mohammed Atta used to get on those airplanes with the hijackers. And they were all visa overstays, and not one piece of paper has been written regarding changing our visa overstay issues. So talk about walls, talk about national security, all the things. The two things that the terrorists on September 11th, 2001 used against us, we haven't done anything about billions of dollars later, Matt.
Well, that's right. I mean, you exactly hit on it. I mean, when you realize that, most of these visa overstays are happening. Well, what do you do? What is? There's some simple things you certainly could do, and this is, one is regarding, verification, employment verification. Really simple process. You could do that. Employers could do that and change it. But here's let me take another step back at 30,000 feet and say this. We need workers. There's a job shortage in America. Agriculture industries, our staff with 70% of immigrants right now, and Americans love to eat, and food prices keep going up. There are lots of reasons for that, and one of them, I believe, is that you're seeing a kind of a crackdown on immigration. So I would say that, look, I would have visas that are open to workers to come and work, and just recognize that. And then I think there's another myth surrounding kind of the immigration conversation, which is the idea of criminals. Mm-hmm. Most immigrants are not your hardened criminals. In fact, they're very law-abiding citizens when compared to your average, ordinary American citizen. Why is that? Well, if they get into trouble, they know they're going to be sent back overseas and caught, and they'll lose, their employment here in America and other things like that. So I think there's just so many myths surrounding this, but it is a broken process. I mean, I've got a neighbor across the street who's married to a British woman. They have 2 children, and she just became a U.S. citizen after years and years of waiting. This kind of thing needs to be reformed.
Well, is the demagoguery, and we watched it Saturday between the Republican and Democratic candidates, where Corey Stewart brought up illegal immigration and Tim Kaine immediately started defending immigrants. And I said, well, they're not the same thing. Even the crowd started to grow restless at that. The pivoting of this from an illegal immigration issue to, but we're a nation of immigrants. Nobody denied that. It's just, everyone who's here needs to understand what the rights and the responsibilities are. I think that's always been my issue, is that somebody who's here without, going through the process doesn't understand their responsibilities that go along with the rights that we're going to protect for them. Is that a fair thing to say, Matt?
Yeah, I do. I think it's absolutely fair. And most Americans are, very open to a larger immigration pool coming through, as long as it's done the correct way, as long as there's a citizenship component, there's a teaching component to this, that they, understand that, and most countries do this, right? You go to another country, if everything from an official language to certain customs they have, that's okay. I mean, that's what countries do, and they can certainly set that up that way. So yeah, I think that this issue's gotten so out of hand and so politically charged. And what happens? Well, we have issues like we do in the border right now, the separation deal. You have you have visa overstays, because there's really very few ways to get into the country, right? There's very few options to get into America, and we have still some of the strictest laws on the books that really, I think, the government gets in the way. So what are people doing? Oh, they're going around the government. They're going around the rules on the books, because the rules are so burdensome that there's just really mostly no way they're going to get through the legal means to get to America. Mm-hmm. Are so burdensome they just can't do it.
I spoke to the head of the Border Guards Union last summer at an immigration reform event. And I asked him, I said, how much of illegal immigration is human trafficking, vis-a-vis somebody who's thrown into a truck and, is deposited somewhere to work on a farm, not even realizing that they've broken the law by doing it. They've just sort of been trafficked there, ostensibly like a chop shop goes out looking for a fender of a car, so they steal your car. And he said the numbers are close to 70% of all the people who are in this country illegally were brought here with no knowledge that they were being brought somewhere they weren't allowed to go because they were farm workers or somebody had a list. Do you support something like E-Verify that would go after the consumers that drive that kind of industry?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think E-Verify is, again, it's hard. I hate to burden employers with more regulations. Mm-hmm. There's a bit of me that crawls about that. But again, I also want to get around the government, the multiple rules and multiple agencies the government has set up to to bring people in legally. I tell you what, I would say the jury's out in that. I want to think about that some. But, here's what I would say. 70% of immigration to the U.S., it's relatives, right? So we have this chain migration that I think we could curb there. That's a small little piece of this pie that we could make some modifications to get on top of this process.
Well, Matt, I really appreciate you staying over with us. And, when you're in Charlottesville, we want to host you with some things because this is a big event, the Senate race in 2018. There are so many moving parts in it, but I really appreciate you coming back on the program. I want to make this a regular thing, so I apologize for losing your number the first time, and my emails were bad. But now we've got you. We've got you. We're not letting go of you, Matt Waters. It's mattwaters.com as well. Right. And I appreciate it, sir. You have a great morning.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for listening this week to Freedom and Prosperity Radio. On behalf of everybody at the Virginia Institute for Public Policy, my name is Joe Thomas. Until next week, so long, and thanks for all the fish.